Michael here with another Bible class video for you guys. This quarter we've been talking about measuring by God's rule, and we are on lesson number 10 today. It's called Jonah, a prophet to Nineveh. But before we get into Jonah, let's talk about what all we've covered this quarter. It has been so fun as we've been doing these videos and had our Bible classes on Wednesday nights, and I hope you guys have learned a lot and enjoyed it. I know I have. But we started all the way back at the beginning of the divided kingdom. Remember, there was the united kingdom with King Saul and King David and King Solomon, but then after that the kingdom split. The northern kingdom was still called Israel and was led by Jeroboam, and the southern kingdom was called Judah and was led by Rehoboam. So first we traced all the way down the line all 19 kings of the northern kingdom, Israel, and all 19 of them were bad. We saw some interesting stories, like, do you guys remember Jehu? He was the one who was a crazy driver. He was always driving his chariot like crazy. And then there were some that were worse than others. They were all bad, but some were worse than others. And old King Ahab, he was probably the worst. So we talked about all 19 of them, all of them bad, bad, bad. And then we came back and we started talking about the kings and the one queen of Judah, Queen Athaliah, even though she was not a good queen. But we did talk about the 8 good kings, and that was exciting. And now you guys know all 8 good kings of Judah: Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, Amaziah, Uzziah, who's sometimes called Azariah, Jotham, Hezekiah, and Josiah. We talked about all 8 good kings, but just last week we had the sad story that at the end of the southern kingdom, they were also conquered by an enemy army, and they were also led into captivity. But instead of Assyrian captivity, where the northern kingdom went, the southern kingdom was conquered by a place called Babylon. And so they went into Babylonian captivity. So that's what we have covered so far. Now we're going to have a couple lessons over these next couple weeks talking about prophets. And so on our timeline, the kings are shown here with their crowns on, but we also have the prophets up here with their names on scrolls. We talk about the story of Jonah all the time. It's such a wonderful story, but did you guys know that Jonah was a prophet to the northern kingdom? He was a prophet during Jeroboam II. And so just like Elijah and Elisha were prophets to the northern kingdom, Jonah was also a prophet for the northern kingdom. We can read about that in 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25. It tells us that Jonah was a prophet to the northern kingdom. The interesting thing is there were probably lots of things that he prophesied to King Jeroboam II that we don't even know about. But we do know about the instructions that God gave him about going to Nineveh. And so for our lesson today, we're going to learn some neat things about on the map, and we're going to learn some neat things with some New Testament connections, and hopefully understand a little more about why was it that Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh, and what can we learn from that today. All right, guys, let's look at this map together. Now, we remember in the book of Jonah, God telling him to go to Nineveh, but Jonah began as a prophet to northern kingdom Israel. So here is our map of the divided kingdom that we have in our classroom that we've been using on Wednesday nights. And we know that Jonah was a prophet to northern kingdom Israel because of 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25, where it says that the things that happened were just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had promised through Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-Hepher. So when we look at Jonah chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai." So, we know that that's Jonah, son of Amittai, the same one that he was a prophet to northern kingdom Israel. So we don't know exactly where he was when God spoke to him in Jonah chapter 1 verse 1 as the book begins, when God first said, I want you to go to Nineveh, but he was probably either in or near Samaria, the capital city of northern kingdom Israel. Now, this map isn't even big enough to show where Nineveh would be, so we're going to have to scooch it on over here to the side and make some more room, and way up here he would have to go all this way to get to Nineveh. It was a long way up to the northeast of Israel. But instead, he went just a little ways to the southwest, to a town called Joppa, which was right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And while he was at Joppa, he got on a boat headed to Tarshish. Tarshish was as far west as they could imagine. And if there's some grown-ups watching with you, they could help explain that it's in modern-day Spain near the Strait of Gibraltar. So, why was it that he did not want to go to Nineveh? Now, remember what we were talking about earlier with our timeline, and remember where Jonah fits into the history of northern kingdom Israel. He prophesied during the reign of Jeroboam II. Now, this is before they were led into captivity, but the Assyrians were already considered enemies of Israel. And so Nineveh was one of the major cities in the kingdom of Assyria. So they were enemies, and they were known for being especially mean and evil to the people that they fought against. And so Jonah really had no interest in going to preach to them because he did not want God to forgive them. He did not want them to be saved. And we see that through the rest of the story. Okay, I've got one last little tidbit to include, especially for the grown-ups out there. If you have been following along in our daily Bible readings calendar, or if you've been following along in the Facebook group Mid-County Church Happenings, you might have noticed that today's reading, well, I'm recording this on Thursday, February 11th, so today's reading is Acts chapter 10 through 12, and we read about Cornelius. Did you happen to notice what town Peter was in when the men from Cornelius' household arrived to ask him to go talk to them? He was in Joppa. I find it interesting that he was in the same town where Jonah had made the decision to run the other way because he didn't want to talk to the people from Assyria, the Ninevites. And so when Peter was faced with the same choice in the same town, he didn't run the other direction. He went straight there to talk to Cornelius. And the reason that that's interesting is because Peter grew up as a Jew, and Cornelius was a Gentile. And not just any Gentile, he was a Roman, he was an officer in the Roman army. And so the Jews would have viewed Cornelius and people like him in much the same way that Jonah would have looked at the people from Nineveh. But when Peter was faced with the same decision in the same town, he didn't run the other way. He went straight to Cornelius' house, and he told them about Jesus. And that day, Cornelius and his whole household were baptized. And it was a wonderful day full of rejoicing. And that's a great example for us, that we can learn, that we can share the gospel with anyone and everyone, even when it might not look like it to us, and it might not be the people that we would first choose to talk to, that we can trust God and trust that God can change hearts even today. All right, thanks so much for being with us for Bible time. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.